Hello everybody, here we are today continuing on with our season previews talking about the Calgary Flames. Now before we get started, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the channel. That being said, let's get on into it. So the last time we saw the Calgary Flames play, they were a team that had some ups and downs and got red hot towards the end of the year before just really running out of time. Of course, they had the Jets that were there that kind of just kept sliding down. So you're thinking maybe Calgary, if they get on this good run, they can go out there and they can make the playoffs. Not so, as they missed out on the postseason. And there's a lot of things to talk about for this team and some things that have changed or are going to need to change in order for them to get back to the playoffs. The first thing being, will they see some turnarounds from the big name additions that they got? Now, I'm really looking here at Jonathan Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri. They were both big name guys that were expected to hopefully replace, or at least somewhat replace, Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau. Both of them were coming off of career years, and Huberdeau's numbers slid dramatically. I think he had the biggest turnaround from one season to the next in terms of points. Not something you're really looking forward to. If you're making history, you would rather go from 50 points to 120, and that is obviously not what happened with Hoops. So for him, he did have a decent stretch in terms of points per game. His final 19 games, he had 15 games, and that was a 65-point pace. Still not ideal, and you're looking at him wondering, will he be able to get back to his old form? If he is missing something, I could say that possibly it's the fact that Florida was a very gifted team offensively with their forward group, and anytime you're able to play with Alexander Barkov, especially when Barkov's game is rolling, that could be a piece of what he's missing. And I think you could argue somewhat similar things here with Kadri, a guy that I by no means do I think is a bad player, but he went to Colorado and the Avs were an up-and-coming team that was consistently achieving, but not achieving really what they wanted. They had motivation, they had drive, they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. He goes and gets a deal in Alberta, and again, you're kind of wondering with him, is he going to be a guy that can go out there and do good things for them? I like both of these players, and I do hope that they are able to get a turnaround going, but if not, they are owed some money, and Flames fans might just riot because of that, and they are not going to appreciate if there is another down year by both guys, especially Huberdeau. The second thing here is, can Jacob Markstrom get back into his form, or can Calgary kind of get their goalie going back again? Now, last year he went 23, 21, and 12 with a 2.92 goals against average, an .892 save percentage, and a goal saved above average of negative 18.4, basically meaning an average goalie would have stopped 18 more goals or not allowed 18 more goals than he had done. So this was kind of one of those situations where, looking at Markstrom, a guy that is a Canucks fan I have watched closely, even when he went over to Calgary, because I was partially heartbroken, but partially wanted to see him do well, even if it was for a rival. This was basically his worst year that he has had since he was a consistent player, or I guess starter in the league. I'm looking at this and I'm starting to panic a little bit if you are a fan of the team, because Calgary did a pretty good job at suppressing chances and shots, quality chances especially. And I am also concerned because of his age. He is 33. He is a workhorse, or had a history, especially in Vancouver, where they just kept throwing him out there because they knew that was their best chance for them to win. And he is a guy that also still has some money left on his deal. Now, granted, I think it gets a little bit cheaper on the back end here, but he's got 3 years left on the contract. I'm looking at this situation. They've got plenty of guys that they could possibly roll with if Markstrom struggles, to where they say, you know, maybe we'll take some games away from you. Vladar is one of those, but also Dustin Wolf, a guy that just won the AHL award for best goalie. And for the Heat, they ended up doing pretty well in the AHL. I'm not going to say that I follow the AHL as closely as I probably should. I need to buy a TV package. One of these days I will get around to that. Right now I'm just running low on time. But for them, whatever happens here, they really need to get some form of Markstrom back, whether that's a 1A, 1B goalie that's good, or a guy that can go back to being their starter. Because with the money he's owed again, and the fact that he still has 3 years on his deal, would he be an ideal trade candidate if things didn't work out? Probably not. Why would you want a 33-year-old goalie that's struggling on a team that is good defensively, or at least put up good defensive numbers? I don't think many people would want to take a bite on that unless they got something in return, something Calgary really wants to stay away from at the moment, so we will see. And then the final part is, will there be a better environment? I look at Calgary and I think back to last season and just what they've been able to do in general the past few years with Daryl Sutter. They were not a bad team by any means, but especially in the offseason, it seems like we heard more and more and more about how toxic things had gotten. And you had heard multiple players basically say, hey, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here so much that I will just not play, or I can tell you right now that if he's not gone, then I'm not going to be here in general. And for Sutter, it's kind of a shame because, again, you're looking at a guy that was able to achieve so much in LA. He took this Flames team back to the Stanley Cup, or just took him to the Stanley Cup final back in 2004. Arguably should have won if a call would have been different in that series. We're not going to talk about that. But it is one of those things where it seems like the situation in the organization just continued to degrade, and they made a decision that they felt like was best for them. They end up going with Ryan Huska, and he is a guy that's got a pretty extensive, or at least a good time as an AHL head coach, and has been one of Calgary's guys, or been in Calgary's structure for a minute. So you're kind of rewarding a guy that's within the system and saying, hey, you know, you've been with us for a while. We just got burned by a coach that has a pretty good pedigree. We need somebody to come in here and fix some things, and boy, does he have a few things to fix, the locker room being one of them, and also the power play. But I kind of want to say that as long as he does not do whatever Sutter did, which I can only imagine because he reminds me a lot of John Tortorella, he'll probably be in a good spot. And we will see that this team that has playoff ambitions, whether or not the head coaching change will have an impact on the locker room. Because, again, with all of the situations we're looking at in the league with some of these teams, the locker room does seem to be playing a bigger factor with whether or not these teams will have success. Because I'm going to be honest, if you have to eat, fly, shower, whatever the case is with a lot of these guys, or just be around the coaches a lot with film, if you hate them, you really would prefer to be somewhere else or them to be gone. So I'm hoping that things can kind of get going for those guys, because why would you want to be in a bad situation? But we'll see. Overall, I'm looking at Calgary, and they are in a spot where I do think they can make the playoffs. The blue line has some names that you look at and say, well, if they're able to play well, they're going to be all right here. And I also think that you look at what the Flames are able to do last year defensively and say, well, if Markstrom can just get back to it. And I think a big problem for him was he wasn't really able to find a lot of consistency. I couldn't check all the game logs because my data was really low, or just slower out where I was at. But it seems like there'd be a few games where it was, you know, sub 900 save percentage, where he'd have some bad games, but then right around the corner, there'd be a pretty good performance. You're like, man, if this guy could just figure things out with a team that is rewarding him, that would be good. And for them, I think that if they are able to play a good structure, where they are able to limit those opportunities, and Markstrom can get back in between the pipes and get comfortable, the forward group should be good enough to at least keep them in the talks for it. However, I will say they lost Tyler Toffoli. That stinks after career year for him, as he is now in New Jersey. Sharangovich is going to have to be a guy that steps up for them. Again, Huberdeau, Kadri, just so many guys that I think need to be able to fill in here, that if they don't, they are in a terrible spot. But I also will say, this Flames team shouldn't be terrible, and I think that they very well could have a chance to be in the wildcard hunt again like they were last season. If they miss again, things are going to get really interesting. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the Calgary Flames for this upcoming season? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, have a great night, and you will all be alright. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.